Hope you've enjoyed the Hall of Fame special, the first class, 25 nominees officially named. And this final NASCAR Sprint Cup practice scheduled to begin at 6:35 after an hour-and-a-half delay. It is underway. Steve Burns, Larry McReynolds, and Jeff Hammond with you. And boys, it's underway in a big way.
Well, I think the big thing these guys are trying to evaluate now, I'm sure there were a lot of changes that went on in the garage area, but how much more grip the racetrack has gained. I'm sure the track temperatures probably went down 20, 30 degrees from what it was this afternoon. And obviously when it goes down, these cars will drive better. They'll handle better. They don't quit bouncing around as bad, but they will gain grip.
I've seen some cars jumping up and down right there. I'm surprised the drivers haven't come back to pit road. But Larry, you're right. The track temperature down probably around 100 degrees or less, where it was almost 140 earlier this afternoon. So you've got to believe that these cars are going to drive like Cadillacs, or at least feel like they got the grip of a Cadillac compared to what it did earlier. We see the 88 car, Dale Earnhardt Jr. down on the bottom, being followed by teammate Mark Martin. And you've got to believe, Steve Burns, this is a sight we may see a lot of come Saturday.
Now, I want you to watch that front splitter, Steve, on the 88 car, the part right at the bottom. See how it's against the track? This should just give you a great indication of how many dips and bumps are in this racetrack. The goal would be to have that, especially here in the corners, the goal would be to have that splitter sealed against the asphalt all the way around the racetrack, but you can't hardly do it here because of how rough this track is.
And I think you also noticed, you see the sparks fly to the 26 car. That's who he is following. Dale Earnhardt Jr. is behind Jamie McMurray. I saw sparks out underneath his car because, hey, it's starting to get a little bit late at night, and those kind of things are kind of rear its ugly head. Plus, Steve, the speeds will probably come up during this practice session. Track's got more grip. Air temperature's a little bit cooler. Everything makes for a faster Daytona.
Could be a great weekend for Junior Nation. Our trackside buddy, Elliott Sadler, told us he talked to Dale Jr. after the race in New Hampshire, said Dale Jr. was smiling and happy for the first time in a long time.
Steve, he should have been. Yeah, I know the box score that I call it shows he finished 13th. You go, well, what kind of day was that? But they ran good. They ran good at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the race. They were one of the cars that had to come to pit road under green before the rains came to put fuel in, but they were up there running in the top 5 a big portion of the day, so they have to feel good. And let's face it, we're at a restrictor plate racetrack, and we know how much he loves that type of racing.
Lindsey, what's going on with the 5 car of Mark Martin, Dale Jr.'s teammate? Having technical difficulties with Lindsey's mic. We'll be back down there momentarily.
You know, we talked to Mark during that first practice session, and he did not run a lot of laps. This is a brand new race car for Mark that he's got here, and we know that a lot of guys were trying to work through some things with brand new race cars, but like he said, I don't know if I'm happy with my car, but I'm not sure anybody was happy with their car, completely happy in that first practice session.
There were some really ugly and very loose race cars during that first practice session. Again, we talked about a new right side tire, hot track conditions, a lot of variables that made it pretty much, you know, I wouldn't consider a bad practice session, but one that you really had to kind of stay on your toes. And going back to Mark Martin, remember, he had an oil lineup on this new car that looked or sounded like to me like the car was bottoming out, and they drug a hole in it, and he spent basically the remainder of that whole practice session in the garage making repairs. And at least right now, early part of this practice, after running about 6 laps, looks like everything's all green as Mark makes a move to the inside once again to get back behind his teammate Dale Earnhardt Jr.
In first practice, it started at 4 Eastern here in Daytona. We saw packs of 4 or 5, maybe 6 cars, but you see a lot more cars running side by side and nose to tail.
And 3 wide. Look here, all of a sudden, we've got guys that are going to start pushing the envelope just a little bit. You see Kurt Busch back there in that 2 car being followed by his teammate Sam Hornish Jr., and they're going to probably try to push their way up through here. Look at Joey Logano. He's trying to slide it middle, or he can't hold his car down, one of the two. But there'll be a lot of this going on during this practice, trying to find out, where can I take my car? What will it stand? Is this good or is this bad? Who can I dance with? It's time, as we like to say, Larry, now it's time to find out who your dance partners are going to be tomorrow. Come Saturday night.
Yeah, these crew chiefs standing on top of these haulers in the garage area, they're not real excited about what they're seeing right here, but they know this is what these cars and these drivers, this is the positions they'll be in tomorrow night, and the only way you're going to find out how your car's driving, if you put it in this situation tonight, you've got to get enough laps on the tires, you've got to burn fuel off, you've got to go through a certain number of laps to find out what you've got.
And Larry, this right here, you know yourself as a crew chief, is one of those kind of times I kind of hold my breath. You've got Greg Biffle, Tony Stewart, and A.J. Allman. They're trying to blend into this group. They're not running at speed yet, and a lot of these guys' closing rates sometimes can get you in trouble. You wind up 3 wide, and you think, well, I'll duck to the inside, and all of a sudden this cat on the inside, well, he's running 30 mile an hour slower than you are.
And you know, our voice goes up an octave when we see them 3 wide. As you see, the racetrack is plenty wide enough for 3 cars. It's wide enough for 4 cars. But the way these cars are bouncing around and they're sitting out there averaging over 190 miles an hour, all it takes is one car to bounce the wrong way, and next thing you know, you've wiped out a dozen
What you talking about, McReynolds? What you talking about? Our voice is getting high.
That sounds like some drivers I work with.
Sounded like Darrell Waltrip to me. Oh my gosh, am I talking like Darrell Waltrip again?
Hey, stay with us. Hope you're having a great 4th of July weekend. More final practice after this. This week, Speed S2 heart-pounding at Knights of Wreck first. Catch an all-new episode tonight at 10 Eastern. Then the action continues with a Wrecked Marathon tomorrow night beginning at 7:30 Eastern. Get hooked on Wreck. Life in the crash lane exclusively on Speed. And I will resist the temptation to make any bad puns, but we're holding our breath right now.
We've got about 26 or 27 race cars out there in a pack right now, and this is about as good as it's going to get in practice right here.
Matt, what's going on with Jeff Gordon?
Well, Steve, when you fast forward 48 hours, this is the time of night that we'll be racing when we run the Coke 0400. And Steve Letarte, the crew chief on Jeff Gordon's car, they were one of the teams that experienced tire issues in that first practice session. And being the fact that they only have 4 sets of tires until the race, one of those you'll qualify on, they didn't want to take an opportunity and use up a set, waiting till this section of the night to really see exactly what they have with their race car. And Jeff Gordon was running up on the high line. He got his spotter. Shannon to work him back down to the inside. He is P13 on the board, but really, times here, Larry Mack and Jeff and Steve, you know, it's not really about what it says in the stopwatch. It's how well your car stocks up, how well you're able to maneuver around through the traffic and get your car in the right position so when we get that last lap or 2 to go, you can make a run for the win.
Well, he's run 11 laps in this practice session, and he ran 15 laps in that earlier practice. We see his teammate Jimmy Johnson in the 48 car out there right now. I was trying to see, Jimmy has actually just went out there because he's only completed 2 laps so far.
Yeah, he's 28th right now on the board as far as lap times are concerned. But the thing is, Larry, you know yourself, again, watching that board, which we say we can't do or need to be careful. Jimmy, a little bit careful right there, trying to fit in between the 6 and the 42. This is practice. But you got to get a good run. You got to get somebody to make that really fast lap. So that's really not a great indicator. But I think for Jeff Gordon, those 11 laps that he's got through finish up running will give them a great indicator, because they had tire trouble, Steve, about 15 laps in that first practice. So they'll at least have some idea whether or not the adjustments they made during this period since this afternoon's practice, if it fixed their problem or not.
We've talked about how these cars actually look like they're bouncing. They're up and down. Larry, you talked about it a moment ago. You can really see it going through the corners there.
And you know, you have a very small box of adjustments that you can make on this race car. We talked about that earlier. That the rear springs and the rear shocks are pretty much dictated by NASCAR to keep everybody on equal ground as far as the height of the rear wing off the ground. But really all you have to work with, and that's what teams were really working hard with in that first practice session, was front springs, front shocks, and the front sway bar. And it's a package that you have to work together, the springs, the shocks, and the sway bar working together.
Again, right now we're riding along with Denny Hamlin down the back straightaway. And again, from this camera angle here, you can kind of see the cars in front of him, how they're kind of bouncing around. His car's bouncing around. This racetrack it may appear to be smooth, but it's so rough. It's like running down a back dirt road back in North Carolina.
Well, it's funny you make that reference, Jeff. You know, this racetrack is only about 1/10 of a mile shorter than Talladega, but one driver referenced the difference between Talladega being like a perfectly smooth 8-lane wide interstate, easy to drive. Car drives good. Everybody's car drives good. You come here, it's like driving down a very curvy dirt road through the woods, and you're always having to work the wheel, and you never know which bump you're going to hit around the next corner.
We talk about it every time we come to Daytona, handling. You got to get that car to turn, to drive, and you guys made the point in earlier practice. It's even tougher here in the summer when it's had time to sit in this Florida sun.
It's literally, Steve, I mean, it's hard to describe what we fight from crew chief standpoints of what gets these cars comfortable to a driver, and to see the look on their faces when they come in from a practice session, it takes their breath away. You're out there 3 wide, running around, the car is bouncing, it's dipping, it's diving, you don't know whether it's going to jump to the right, jump to the left, or just jump straight up in the air. It is really, you've got your handful, and you earn your money at a place like Daytona, in particular during this period of the year.
Matt was talking about Jeff Gordon's spotter, Shannon McGlamory, even during this practice session, and those spotters are right above us. And it's about a half a mile over there to that back straightaway, but that spotter, he's just as important during this practice session as he is that race tomorrow, keeping you out of trouble, making you aware of the cars that are around you, pulling up to you, beside you, above you, below you. Pretty critical for the spotter even in this practice session.
Not to mention, sometimes he just needs to calm the driver down when he starts seeing him making some move like, hey, remember this is practice. Remember this is practice.
On board with Denny Hamlin, one of the Joe Gibbs Racing drivers. Gibbs cars have won 3 of the last 4 July Daytona races. Tomorrow night on Speed, kick off your July 4th weekend with the ultimate Friday night house party, trackside. The fun from Daytona begins tomorrow night at 7 Eastern. NASCAR on Speed. Be there. Our guests include Jason Leffler, Greg Zipadelli, and Darrell Waltrip, one of the 25 nominees for the inaugural Hall of Fame, which will debut in 2010. We've got Lindsay's microphone problems dialed in. Lindsay, what's going on?
Oh, there we go, guys. Right now you're watching the number 5 crew. They're working on Mark Martin's car. He said he's a little bit free in, was feeling a little bit loose, but the biggest sigh of relief for them is this oil line issue that you guys had talked about before, basically. In that first practice, they had a broken oil line, and it was the line that goes through the motor, so they replaced it, but they were even more concerned just that they might have some more motor issues. So the good news is they're not feeling any of those. Like I said, Mark just feeling a little bit loose out there. They are going to give him 4 new tires, is what they talked about on the radio. Just dial him in a little bit more to get some more laps out there on the track, Steve.
All right, thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah, Mark has run 12 laps in this practice session, so you get a feeling he probably started this practice with the same tires that maybe he ran in the first practice, and he ran 7 laps, so that means he's got about half of a fuel run on that first set of tires. Now they're going to their second set.
48 Daytona starts in the Sprint Cup Series for Mark Martin. 9 top 5s, but never a winner.
You see Matt Kenseth in that 17 car. I think he just went out on the racetrack, and you see the pack will start running him down. This is the difference between a car by himself and a pack of cars that's lined up together. Matt Kenseth won here the last time we were here back in February. Of course, we know that's not the car because it's over in the Daytona Experience, but we're riding with Matt Kenseth. You look out, and I want you to watch the closing rate of those cars coming up to him, coming down the back straightaway.
It's Bobby Labonte right there directly behind him, and then behind him is Tony Stewart. And guys, I've been watching Tony Stewart. He's drifted back into the pack. He's led the pack. It looks to me like he has got a pretty fast number 14 for this weekend, at least so far. He's run quite a few laps, but he seems like he can keep that car up front. He's got a pretty strong ride right there. There is a different little colors this weekend. If you don't quite recognize the 14, got Burger King on the side of it, blue and white and gold.
Yeah, Marty Snyder told us in first practice that Greg Biffle had related from the cockpit of his number 16 car that looked like Tony Stewart was the class of the
It's kind of like, here he comes, and there he goes.
You mentioned those 3 Joe Gibbs wins. We know 2 of them was by Tony Stewart when he was driving the 20 car. Kyle Busch won this race a year ago. Jamie McMurray won it 2 years ago in 2007.
Looking inside the 96 car, got a little bit of help there from former teammate Denny Hamlin, the 11, and followed really close by the 48 of Jimmy Johnson.
And you can watch the 17 car now that he's in the pack, and he'll start getting some help back there. He very well may be able to work his way back up through there now that he's up to speed and possibly get some help behind him.
A.J. Allmendinger in the 44 car, followed by a 3-time Daytona winner, Michael Waltrip in the 55.
And Larry, you've been here before, and you've got to believe, as we're riding along here with Matt Kenseth, that Daytona now is a little bit different than what it was in February when he first drove through the tunnel. Coming back this time being a defending champion here at this racetrack, got to be extra special.
Well, you know it, Jeff, because you experienced it with Darrell in 1989. I was able to experience it twice with Davey Allison and Dale Earnhardt. Winning a race, any race is special. But when you win the Daytona 500, it doesn't stay with you the rest of the year. It doesn't stay with you the rest of your career. It stays with you absolutely the rest of your life, just like winning a championship.
It really does. And I think Kevin Harvick summed it up the best. He said, you know, I've won nationwide championships. I've won the Brickyard. I've won an all-star race. He said, but winning the Daytona 500, he says, for some reason, people remember that. And he says, when they recognize me as a former winner of a Daytona 500 champion, he said, man, he said, I get goosebumps all over for it. And I'm sure Matt Kenseth probably shared the same thing.
You know, it's interesting. It was my privilege to interview him down in the makeshift victory lane as we take a look at him winning the Daytona 500. And you know, Matt's a pretty even-keeled kind of guy, but he got emotional down there, tears in his eyes, and I think that tells you more than anything what this race means to the racers, Larry.
Yeah, and I think I'm right in saying that was Roush Fenway's very first Daytona 500 win. It was. So that was big for that whole organization.
Matt Yoakum, what's going on with Carl Edwards?
Well, catching up with the driver of the 99. So comparing your first session to this session, how big of a gain with the car?
I think it was a big gain. I mean, but it's kind of a big gain for everyone because there's so much more grip. But we did get the balance a lot better. And I guess we're going to quit early and go get a Subway sandwich and call it a night, man. It's been a long, hot day here. All the guys have worked really hard. They said by the time they get back to the hotel, it'll be about a 20-hour day for them. So real proud of my guys. And I think the Subway Fusion should be pretty fast for the race.
Well, handicapping the field, looking at the guys who are running around you, who looked as good as you or maybe even a little better?
14 car looked really good. His looked like it ran real well. I don't know how many laps he had on his tires. Who else? The 20 car looked like he was having a little bit of trouble. Looked like he was real loose. Newman looked real loose. Those are the ones I remember the most because they were, I mean, they were driving the wheels off them. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how the cars change throughout a run and see who can hang on. And this is just small enough and just slick enough. You have to start driving it like a dirt track. It's kind of fun.
Well, if that's the case, then Carl Edwards will really have a good Saturday night.
All right, thank you very much, Matt. See Martin Truex Jr. out in front, David Rudiman. The outside line closing fast on the high side, led by Denny Hamlin, Casey Mears, and Kurt Busch. Stay with us here in Daytona. Toyota of David Rudiman leading the way in front of the Chevrolet of Ryan Newman. Final practice continues here at the Daytona International Speedway, delayed for about an hour and a half by a thunder shower. Practice supposed to start at 6:35 local.
And the thing about David Rudiman right now, not only is he leading the 39 back toward the front of this pack, he is the fastest guy so far during this practice session at over 192 miles an hour in the draft.
You know, looking at Ryan Newman in that 39 car, if you remember, he went on a run of a bunch of top 10 finishes in a row and was actually had moved to 4th in the points after Pocono. But when you look at his last 3 runs, he's only had 1 finish inside the top 20. He finished 17th at Infineon, and he has now fallen to 7th in points. So those guys, they need to stop the bleeding here as we only have 9 races to go until the chase.
Well, and we just took a look at Matt Kenseth, you know, the Daytona 500 champion. You guys pointed this out at the top of this show. Listen, he's 10th in points, but he is by no means safely in that top 12.
No, he's not. But you know, going back to that 39 car, he was in the hunt and he was in a position to win that race last weekend, but ran out of fuel.
Yep.
And then checking back with the team, there was just a little bit of a miscalculation because you wonder when you run short on fuel and you think you're okay, either somebody misfigured.
Clear by half, clear by 1.
You listen to the spotter right there trying to help him make sure he is in good shape. But either somebody misfigured or, in this case, somebody didn't quite get the car full, and that's what it really turned out. They checked to make sure who made the mistake.
You're all clear, you're all clear.
So they could make sure that it didn't happen again. We got to go back to Loudon, but he had a pretty good race car, and they were on the right strategy to have a good finish up there.
That voice we're listening to is Ryan Newman's dad, Greg Newman, that spots for him. Greg used to spot for him in practice, and now that he's moved to Stewart Haas, he spots for him practice and the race.
3 back to the 24.
And let's not forget, he was spotting for him the night that he won the Daytona 500.
Yes, he was.
24 is coming to your bumper.
These drivers will qualify a little bit after 4 Eastern tomorrow here at Daytona. We'll have that for you.
But just listen to that information that Greg gave Ryan. 24 cars 3 back, meaning 3 car lengths back.
24, picking up 2 slow ones on the bottom.
He's constantly feeding information that Ryan needs to know.
3 to the 24.
3 back to the 24. I mean, and if you notice, the voice is just nice and calm.
Yeah, Greg Newman told me before the race at Talladega, Larry, that that's what he focuses on at the restrictor plate tracks of Talladega and Daytona. Who's behind you and how quick are they coming?
And that's where you can anticipate.
You know, you talked about his streak. It was 6 races that he finished in the top 10. It was tied in with Jeff Gordon for the longest streak as far as top 10 finishes in a row. And that's really what you said, Larry. Got him back up there, put him in the right position. But now, hey, he needs to get back on another one of those runs.
But did you notice what he just told him down the back straightaway? 09 behind the 24 car. That tells Ryan, okay, that means that 09 is going to be pushing that 24 car and might get a run on me.
Speaking of the 09, of course, he won at Talladega. Wild finish. He and Carl Edwards made contact coming to the start-finish line, and Carl Edwards wound up in the fence. Brad Keselowski wound up in victory lane.
You know, it's amazing, too, when you think about it. Ryan Newman has been involved in some pretty wild crashes at places like Daytona, Talladega, back at Talladega. I remember distinctly him coming down through here, driving back for Roger Penske in that 12 car, doing cartwheels and barrel rolls right down through here, throwing everything out of that race car. Again, later on that year, another big crash at Talladega. So he and the super speedway sometimes don't get along.
Well, let's take a look at Brad Keselowski. Keselowski driving that 09 car at Talladega. Guys, before the season started, if you would have told me that David Rudiman, Brad Keselowski, and Joey Logano would have won, I would have said, you're crazy. But watch Keselowski close the deal here at Talladega in April.
Carl Edwards, this is through the trial. Remember, the start-finish line is all the way down out of the trial. Once Carl Edwards made that move, Brad Keselowski, he was not going to go below the yellow line like Regan Smith did last year there. And he ends up getting his first win, and James Finch's, Phoenix Racing's first win, period, in Sprint Cup. Now, I've been watching Casey Kane in this 9 car, and looking at our scoring monitor, he just came back out on the racetrack, but he has absolutely run the most laps of anybody in this practice session. He's run 25 laps so far with this 9 car. Casey comes in here 1 point out of the top 12. Boy, he just slid in front of Bobby Labonte. You can see got a little bit tail happy there.
Matter of fact, in first practice this afternoon, we saw the 9 get a little squirrely in that almost that same exact place.
Well, you know at this place, as you get laps on your tires, and this hadn't changed old car, new car, as you get laps on your tires, as you burn fuel off, the car's going to start picking up a bad push off of turn 2. You're going to turn the steering wheel, and the car wants to go straight. So you know that you've got to have that car not loose, but pretty free at the beginning of the run with fresh tires and full of fuel.
All going back to one thing and one thing only, handling.
David Gilliland below the 9 of Casey Kane. David Rudiman credited with the quickest lap in this final practice for the Coke Zero 400. Beginning July 11th, play segment 2 of the Fox Fantasy Auto Racing game powered by Speed. It's free to play, so gather up your friends and create your own private league or compete in one of the many public leagues forming daily. Log on to speedtv.com or foxsports.com, keyword fantasy, and play today. Back at the Daytona International Speedway, this is not fantasy racing. This is the real thing at 192 miles per hour. Let's go to Matt Yoakum.
Steve, big gains for the former Daytona 500 champion Ryan Newman in the 39. His biggest complaint the first run out during this session that the car was just bouncing too much through the bumps. They made a big change in right front and left front springs. That has helped considerably. And they want to try to do one more change getting back out to try to tighten up the entry. He said his loose on entry was his biggest complaint as he's looking at the lap times inside the race car moments ago. If you can take one look while they're making changes up front, one look at his race helmet. How more patriotic can you be? Not only do you have the U.S. Army, you're carrying their colors on the 4th of July, but Ryan Newman went the extra mile, has a special Stars and Stripes helmet paint scheme for this weekend's race. He was very jacked up about it. He's been very proud to carry the Army colors, and boy, what night could it be than to go to victory lane for your first win for this new operation, Stewart Haas, and on July 4th with very patriotic colors.
I think that would be very, very fitting. Absolutely, no question. Of course, the last time Ryan Newman went to victory lane was right here at Daytona, at the Daytona 500, about a year and a half ago in 2008. We're going to ride with Denny Hamlin here in the 11 car. I want you just for a second just to listen to the RPM, how it never changes. You can hear it bob down just a little bit in the corner. You can actually hear it go up as it goes through those dips and bumps. But with this restrictor plate here in the gear rule here, what a lot of the engine builders were telling me this morning is when you get a good draft, you may turn up to about 85, 8,600 RPM. Now tomorrow out there by yourself, because remember you've got a qualifying race the same gear under the impound procedure, they may only turn about 81 or 8,200, but obviously you get in a draft, the speed goes up, the RPM goes up.
As they go down the corners, you really see those cars, as we talked about all night, bouncing around side to side and up and down. Greg Biffle leading the pack, followed by Denny Hamlin, Elliott Sadler, Reed Sorensen in the 43. The action still hot and heavy in this final practice. Work underneath the 24 car. Jeff, Larry, talk about what changes they're affecting on this car.
It looks to me like they're going for a gear change in this 24 car. Again, you have a little bit of flexibility there with the gears you're talking about, and you know undoubtedly he doesn't quite like, or at least the engine there. And matter of fact, there's John right there's the engine tuner right there, pulling the axle loose on the right rear of that car to help expedite getting this gear out.
Yeah, we have a choice of the two gears, a 364 or a 370. Remember, the higher number is a lower gear. If you feel like the pace may slow down, which I don't know that it is, you may opt to go with the little lower gear, the 370. But if Jeff felt like that car was not pulling up in the draft, maybe that the RPM is running out on it, that's when you go to that 364 gear, a little higher gear. Most places we go with the gear rule, you put the lowest gear in it and you forget about it. Here in Talladega, it's kind of another story. You want to play because actually those 6 points of gear can actually change a little bit how the car actually drives.
How it drives, how it pulls up in the draft, as well as fuel mileage. I mean, something, again, we've seen a lot of races here lately being, settled by fuel mileage. So you're looking for that exact RPM range, the exact thing to make this car where it pulls up the best and makes everybody happy as far as the handling and the running of the car. Performance is at a premium.
Final practice continues here at the World Center of Racing, the Daytona International Speedway. Stay with us here on Speed. Speed's presentation of NASCAR Sprint Cup practice from Daytona is brought to you by Toyota. For the latest Toyota racing information, visit toyotaracing.com. Toyota, moving forward.
Going back to that 24 car and that gear change, that's something that very well that Steve Letarte and Jeff Gordon had on their mind. Let's A/B it. Let's see which gear runs the fastest. Let's see which gear makes the car drive the best. And then, of course, after this practice session, they'll make a decision on which gear they want to practice or want to qualify and race with.
And Larry, let's go back to the fact that Mother Nature looked like she may take this practice away from us, but the way things have turned out, you couldn't have asked for it to be any nicer. I mean, it has turned out to be a beautiful night here at Daytona. This is ideal as far as the race conditions are concerned, track conditions. I mean, it's dead on what you're going to hopefully see come Saturday night. And again, what you're saying about Steve Letarte and Jeff Gordon, they couldn't have done it if Mother Nature hadn't cooperated. Now they got an excellent opportunity to kind of ABA that situation. Even talking about the breeze here, I mean, a lot of times wind factors a lot into Daytona. We got little or no wind here at the racetrack now.
Just a nice little breeze.
No variables, no, oh, by the ways. Well, the thing's blowing across this way and creating a problem here. Just go out there, figure out what your race car needs and tune to it. Well, that flag there is working pretty hard, but it looks like it's blowing right down the back straightaway. We got trouble over here.
We got Greg Biffle in the 16 car. And that Sam Hornish in the 77 car, this is the worst fear of a crew chief and a driver for that matter in the closing minutes of final practice.
Greg Biffle thinks that he's all right.
37 minutes into this final practice for the Coke Zero 400. Greg Biffle, who won his very first Sprint Cup Series race here in the July race at Daytona several years ago. Let's take a look. He and Sam Hornish Jr. get together.
Yeah, that was kind of after the fact right there, so I'm not real sure.
Just looking at it,
that.
It's almost like, you know, Greg may have come up and got a little bit, you know, thinking the high lane was clear right there, and it looked like those two guys got together, because almost like the 77 had gotten into his right rear quarter panel and turned him into the outside wall.
Well, there's no question, even though this 16 car is being driven back to the garage area, that he will be going to a backup car, I'm sure. Greg had run a total of 26 laps, and he was actually 17th quickest, and Sam Hornish Jr. had run 18 laps, Matt, and he was 9th.
Larry Mackey came on the radio and he told Greg Irwin, his crew chief. Greg asked him a couple different questions about what happened. He said simply, I got loose, and then that got him into me. So it seemed like he was putting the blame on himself, that the car just got loose, and the 77 of Hornish simply had nowhere to go.
Sam was just a victim.
Yeah.
Like I say, Sam's right up there in the top 10. And he run a total of 18 laps, but both those cars have the look that they're probably going to have to go to a backup car.
Greg Biffle got his first win here back in July of 2003. Right now, he goes to the garage area contact between the 77 of Sam Hornish and the 16 of Greg Biffle.
That's what where you want to be right there. In the garage on jack stand.
That's the safest place in Daytona. Final practice continues here at Daytona International Speedway. After a stoppage, Greg Biffle and Sam Hornish making contact, both cars getting into the wall. Backup car being prepared for Greg Biffle. Meanwhile, let's go back to Lindsey Czarniak.
Steve, you can see Matt Kenseth's crew right now working on their car, and his whole goal in this final practice had been just to get out there, get as many race laps as possible. They were able to run 20 laps, but on the last run, it was interesting because he said that he heard a flapping noise in his car, and so because of that, he had shut down the engine. They brought the car in, and they took off the right front tire that was really shredded pretty badly. They took it off, hauled it away, but definitely something to watch out tomorrow. Matt.
And Lindsey, his teammates over on the 16, the Greg Irwin, Greg Biffle group, now they're going to work on getting what was a car that had 3 races on it, which is now torn up. Now they've gone to their backup car. This car, brand spanking new, and our crew chief's up in the booth. When you unveil a brand new race car, you've got to go through a lot of different things, but the first laps on the racetrack will be qualifying. And keep in mind, so many times we've heard drivers talk about a brand new race car. Maybe the padding didn't fit right in the seat, and maybe his leg went to sleep a little bit. Different nuances that the new car blues, so it'll be interesting to see just how perfect this 16 car is through the rest of the weekend.
This is not what you want to have happen in an impound race. You've only got 2 laps of qualifying coming up. I don't see these guys, they're not working like they think they're going to get it back out there on the racetrack. I would be concerned with car bottoming out, pieces, you know, just like what happened to Mark Martin. He had a brand new car, 13 laps in the run, he ground a hole in the oil line. You know, these are things that they're going to have to worry about and have taken consideration. And I mean, I would really be, basically I'd be sick right now knowing I had to start the race with a brand new car here in pretty much unknown conditions.
But you know, the only thing I think about is I look at Kurt Busch in that 2 car. He finished 4th here a year ago with a brand new race car that had 2 laps and 2 laps only in qualifying, and drove it from the back of the pack. So, you know, I think sometimes, you know, Jeff, you and I, we think back in our era where, you know, we had all the things to deal with that these teams have to deal with, but they got a lot of engineers that work this stuff out. Now, yeah, the 2 qualifying laps, Greg Biffle, tomorrow, that's going to be a pretty important test for that 16
Well, because again, like you say, they make the 2 laps right there, and if they don't like something, they can't work on it and go to the back of the rear of the field if it's a safety type issue. But one thing you were talking about there, Larry, that I didn't have a lot of access to, pull down rigs, K-rigs and stuff like that. So you can go and simulate something with a new car, have a better understanding of what it may get into as far as its first laps on the racetrack. Where before, whenever you bring a new car to a racetrack, you'd always tell the driver, go out and run me a couple laps and come back in, let me check all the tire clearances and everything that go along with it. So a lot of difference between what Greg Irwin's has at his disposal versus my last few years working at Jack Roush.
You know, Matt Kenseth did win the Daytona 500 from the back of the field in a backup car, but they had laps on the racetrack with it. That's the difference that Greg Irwin and Greg Biffle will not have the luxury other than those two qualifying. And remember also, the Daytona 500 was not an impound race. You could work on that thing all the way up to you pushed it through inspection Sunday morning for the 500.
Yeah, we saw Bobby McKeef, the car chief on that 16 team, getting that car prepared. A backup car, Greg Biffle into the wall. 37 minutes into this practice with Sam Hornish.
And one other thing right quick, we talked about, you know, Carl Edwards was talking about his guys working so hard, a 20-hour day. Greg Biffle's team is in the same boat. They've been here for 20 hours, and they may be looking at some additional work that has to be done here tonight to be ready by tomorrow.
You know, I just saw in this pack of cars here that 07 car of Casey Mears. And, you know, we talked to Casey about halfway through that first practice. This is a brand new race car for Casey. Remember, he's at a restrictor plate track working for the first time with Todd Berrier in the group that was made the swap in Richard Childress Racing about a month and a half, 2 months ago. And that 07 car has actually been looking pretty racy in both practice sessions. The one earlier, he's sitting there second quickest. He's run 22 laps with that new car, looking pretty good.
Remember one thing, they swapped crews. Who won the Daytona 500 with Kevin Harvick?
And who runs second in the Daytona 500 this year with Kevin Harvick? Todd Berrier and that group he's working with.
So, I mean, he's got a group of guys working on that deal that have had some success here at this racetrack. And if I was Casey Mears, I would marked it on my calendar. We're going back to Daytona, and guess what? I'm driving for Todd Berrier, man who knows how to get around this racetrack and get a car prepared properly. Pretty good looking car right now. Second fastest in his practice session, but the main thing is up here in that pack, looking like he's pretty racing.
And we're back riding with his teammate Kevin Harvick in that 29 car. Now we're riding with Joey Logano looking at the 29 car. And you've got to believe, speaking of circling races, that this 29 team who comes in here 27th in points, they only have 2 top 10 finishes all year long, one of them being the second place in the 500, that this has probably been a race they've been looking forward to, maybe stop the bleeding. It looks like being 451 points out of the top 12, that more than likely Kevin Harvick will not make the chase. So what can they do? Go out and try to win some races and get competitive.
This time 1 year ago, Kevin Harvick was 12th in points, as you said, Larry, just 27th in this 2009 campaign.
Yeah, he's made the chase 3 consecutive years, so this would be the first time in a while that Kevin Harvick would not be part of the chase.
I mean, you gonna give up on him?
I'm not going to give up, but 451 points and all the drivers you got to leapfrog, plus you're struggling a little bit, it's going to be a pretty tall order.
I'll have to agree with you. I mean, he's going to hate it for him, but at the same time, the best way to heal the bleeding, win, and win again.
Now you can see right there the way the bump draft works. Kyle Busch were riding with him. He was giving Martin Truex Jr. those little bumps down the back straightaway, but if you notice, he got off of him before you get to the corner. And you know what? Nobody has a problem with that. You just don't want to be bump drafting here in the corners with the way these cars are moving around. That's when you'll end up with the big one.
And one thing we haven't talked about, don't forget that yellow line to the bottom of the racetrack is out of bounds.
We got a red and black caution on the racetrack.
So we've got 43 crew chiefs of the 45 that's breathing a sigh of relief.
You're all clear.
So I'm just looking at our scoring monitor, trying to see, Jeff, who wins the award for the most laps running that practice session. I see Reed Sorensen, he's run 34 laps. Joey Logano ran 32. That looks like to be the guys that ran the most laps in that little hour
along
session.
with David Ruderman and Kyle Busch have both run 32 laps in this deal. So 32 and 34 laps, kind of like take home all the practice laps you can run. I'm just wondering if they've got any issues as far as tires are concerned now.
I'm sure we'll find out.
Speed's presentation of NASCAR Sprint Cup practice from Daytona is brought to you by AutoZone, because do it yourself doesn't mean you have to do it alone. Get in the zone, AutoZone. And by Toyota. For the latest Toyota racing information, visit toyotaracing.com.
Casey Kane has said that racing at this track is a lot about luck, but it's also about making good decisions. You got 20-plus laps out there in this final practice. What do you think of what you had?
I think the track's slippery. The tires, my tires were coming apart a little bit there, so we have to keep an eye on that. And handling will be a big part of it. You know, the handling of your car tomorrow. and Saturday, obviously, with the Cup car. It'll be a huge part of it. We were on the loose side there, and the front was hitting the ground, but I think we'll get it fixed up. These guys always do a good job with our Budweiser Dodge.
Were you able to get it to a place, where you feel confident heading into tomorrow for qualifying? And then... No?
No.
You're
Not
big
yet. Not yet, but they will. We're just a little on the free and bouncy side. They'll fix that, and it'll be fine on Saturday night.
So work to be done for Casey Kane, Matt.
Well, Lindsay, when you go down through the garage here, you're listening to different drivers debrief with their crew chiefs. Kyle Busch said his car was tight on the bottom, too free up top. He made a couple comments about different cars that he thought were very good that were around him, like the 44. A.J. Allmendinger, who had a top 5 here in the Daytona 500. Right now, Ryan Newman, whose team made big gains during this practice session, debriefing with his crew chief, Tony Gibson. They just going over a couple different things here, but this is the part of the practice session. Now that it's over, you know where you stand going into Sunday night's 400-miler. A lot of cars that maybe in the first session weren't good made big gains. One of those, Ryan Newman. Steve?
All right, thank you very much, Matt. So this practice wraps up. We did have one incident between Greg Biffle and Sam Hornish, both cars getting into the wall after they made contact. Biffle having to go to a backup car.
And the biggest thing when you think about the top 35, yeah, they're thinking about qualifying, but all they're worried about is in about 48 hours, they know they're going to push out here and they're going to get after it for 400 miles. They know they're in the show. But I think about those 10 go-or-go homers. We saw most of them simply doing nothing but making qualifying runs, but we saw some of them out there in the draft banking that they're going to make this race.
And Jeff, to your point, we were supposed to start this final practice at about 6:35 Eastern, but we had that thunderstorm. You say it may be a blessing in disguise because it might be apples to apples in terms of weather conditions and track conditions.
I know if I was a crew chief down in that garage area right now, I'd be real pleased. I know it's been a long day for these guys, but you got to walk away with not guessing what the weather's going to be like, what the track conditions going to be like when it gets to be this time of the evening. They got a benefit out of a negative, at least in my book.
Hey, you saw Sam Hornish Jr. on that first page, 10th quickest in that 77 car. I think we're pretty confident that he will be going to a backup car. But as long as they go through inspection with their race motor, which an impound race they will, they'll be able to start this race, him and Greg Biffle, where they actually qualify.
You take a look at the rest of...
I just want to point out right quick, because you look at the rest of this practice there, don't worry about Ryan Newman and Jeff Burton, how far down they are. This chart, it can get you really in trouble if you're not careful. That's exactly right. Mark it off, because it's how the car was handling, and is your driver happy with how he kind of runs in traffic.
Hey, don't forget coverage continuing tomorrow, Friday afternoon, 12 p.m., NASCAR Live. Hope you're having a great 4th of July weekend. So long from Daytona, Florida.